uses wrestling. Now he's going for a Kimura.
It's all over!
That's it. Looking to finish it. He's got him out.
Jon Jones is the single most accomplished fighter in the history of mixed martial arts, a trailblazing talent who has somehow extended his run of greatness for well over a decade. But after making a new home for himself at heavyweight, how does the champ stack up against some of the dangerous contenders who lie beneath him in the rankings? Our question is, can any fighter actually beat Jon Jones? Stipe Miocic. To kick things off, we might as well start with the fighter who is next in line for the champ, the divisional GOAT Stipe Miocic, a man who has ended a very long absence from fighting by returning to take on the greatest light heavyweight of all time. Stipe is old, yes, but there's still a lot that he can do to make this fight competitive. With his own wrestling background, Miocic has excellent takedown defense, and after spending 3 fights in there with Daniel Cormier, he has experienced a wrestler who is comparable to Jon. He's also quite rangy when compared to most of the 205-pounders that Jon has beaten in the past. Ngannou might have cracked Stipe's chin last time around, but Miocic has taken a solid amount of time off from fighting, and it's not like Jon has the power that Francis has. Stipe, though, is a fighter who has exceptional boxing, an innate countering ability, and some real championship-level experience. Jones has a very technical stand-up, but he is hittable in boxing exchanges, and in there with someone as proven and powerful as Stipe Miocic. Who knows, perhaps the former champ could make it work. We'll give this older version of Stipe a 5.5 out of 10 chance of beating Jon Bones Jones. Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall made a recent return from injury to re-establish his presence in the heavyweight top 10, and though he is untested at the very highest level, this guy is one of the most interesting prospects the division has had in years. Aspinall might just have the quickest hands in the entire top 15, a slick puncher whose accuracy can cause real problems for Jon on the feet. And if Jones does shoot for his usual takedown, it might just end up playing directly into Aspinall's hands. This English standout is a talented black belt in BJJ. And despite having tremendous KO ability, grappling is his true core skill set. Does this mean that Tom Aspinall will be able to get the better of a wrestler as seasoned as Jones on the mat? Maybe not. But Tom is definitely a multifaceted threat, a talented fighter who has the potential to ask some very difficult questions of the champion. Indeed, he is untested at the highest level, and we will need to know more about him before we get way too excited. But for now, Aspinall's danger levels and his youth give him a 7 out of 10 chance of beating Jon Jones. Jailton Almeida. I think most people will agree that the heavyweight who eventually does beat Jon Jones is probably going to score a finish, and most likely will get it out of nowhere in the early stages of the fight. And when it comes to getting his opponents out of there fast, Jailton Almeida is a real pro.
Work his way to the position. To this point, he's had no issue implementing this strategy.
Blessed with tremendous BJJ skills and an ever-improving stand-up game, this former light heavyweight decided to chance his arm at a run as a heavyweight, and upon arriving to the division last year, he has been on an absolute tear, going 4-0 with all finishes to announce his arrival into the top 10. His most recent win over Jairzinho Rozenstruik in the first round showed just how well Jailton can handle a physically imposing heavyweight, and even the great Jon Jones might struggle if this fight ends up on the mat. It's hard to know just how far Almeida can go, but for now, we'll give him a 5 out of 10 chance at beating the champion, Jon Jones. Sergey Pavlovich. Speaking of guys who could get Jones out of there early, there may not be a more fearsome first-round fighter in the UFC right now than Sergey Pavlovich. This dude is like a Russian Brock Lesnar in terms of his physique, and when he hits people on their chin, they tend to go to sleep. 6 straight first-round knockout wins have made it clear that this powerhouse is for real, and though we don't know how he will do against a wrestler as good as Jones, every second that the champ stands with this guy is a catastrophe waiting to happen. Pavlovich is young enough to round out his overall game, but this guy is the type of fighter who doesn't even need to be technically better than Jon Jones to beat him. The margins for error when you fight a man this powerful are slim to none, and for that reason, we'll give Sergey Pavlovich a 6.5 out of 10 chance of beating Jon. Either he KO'd him early or gets dominated on the map. Alexander Volkov. Alexander Volkov might just be the most underrated fighter in the UFC heavyweight division. Despite losing a few key battles at the highest level, Volkov is young enough that he has been able to go back to the drawing board time and time again, improving piece by piece, and now he appears to be on the best run of form yet. 3 straight wins by way of finish over Jairzinho Rozenstruik, Alexander Romanov, and Tai Tuivasa have propelled this heavyweight giant right back into title contention. And in a matchup with Jones, Volkov is certainly well-rounded enough to ask some major questions of the champ. At 6'7", he would be by far and away the tallest opponent Jon has ever contended with, a striker with a reach that equals the champion's, and Volkov's improvements have seen him become an entirely more effective fighter in every facet of his approach. His striking has always been great, but he's smoother with it now, and his grappling and wrestling game aren't too far behind. Volkov is a dark horse in this race, but we'll give him a 4.5 out of 10 chance of beating Jon Jones. Francis Ngannou. Indeed, he's not in the UFC anymore, but if you do want to know who has the best shot at beating Jon Jones, it's probably Francis Ngannou. Yes, given how bad Ngannou's relationship with the UFC is, there is little to no chance of us ever seeing him in the promotion again. But if the stars aligned and this fight was made, Francis has a level of power and physicality that would, without question, be the most danger Jones has ever been in. Jon would still be the betting favorite, of course, but it would be a lot tighter than most would expect. We'll give Francis a 7.5 out of 10, one of the biggest what-ifs in heavyweight history. Ciryl Gane. And finally, we come to a familiar foe. Sure, you might be wondering why Ciryl Gane even gets a mention, considering how easily Jon ran through him at UFC 285. But Gane is quite new to the MMA world, all things considered, and while it is clear that there are major holes in his grappling and wrestling game, that doesn't mean that he is doomed to fail there repeatedly. If Gane can take the time to improve over the next year or so, there's no doubt that he could be better prepared for a fighter of Jones's skills. Gane is big, he's athletic, he's relatively young within the heavyweight mix, and if he can shore his takedown defense and force Jon into a stand-up fight for any amount of time, he'll be able to carve out some real advantages. Gane looked lost in their first time with Jones, but in his comeback fight against Sergey Pavlovich, it was clear that Ciryl had been working on his all-round game. Sure, he hasn't done enough to earn another shot at the belt just yet, but who knows? A fighter as naturally talented as Gane can never be ruled out. He doesn't need to become a BJJ black belt or a Division 1 level wrestler. He just needs to round out his game enough to give him something to fight Jones off with. Because in that first fight with the current champ, Gane has absolutely nothing, and he looked incredibly tense on the feet as a result. It's a long shot, but we'll give Gane a solid 5.5 out of 10 because of his advantages in the striking department and how much time he has to improve. But what about you? Who do you think poses the greatest challenge to Jon Jones out of the current crop of UFC heavyweights? And do you think he will hang around for long after his fight with Stipe Miocic? Be sure to let us know in the comments section below.